Many international graduates, or IMGs, struggle with the USMLE Step 1, Step 2, or Step 3. Is it because they're suddenly not smart, or is it because they suddenly aren't working hard enough? I don't think so. IMGs are oftentimes some of the hardest working and smartest people from their countries, yet they have lower average scores and they fail the USMLEs at a much higher rate than their US counterparts. I'm Dr. P, and I help people from around the world, including IMGs, break down what the top 1% of test takers for the USMLEs are doing so that you can apply it anywhere at any time to get higher scores in less time. The number one thing that IMGs struggle with is understanding that this test is really different fundamentally than the tests that they've taken up until this point. In most countries around the world, the tests that they take tend to be more about memorization and rote recall. The USMLEs, including Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3, are all about the application of concepts. So I'm going to read some statements from the actual test writer's guide that the NBME who publishes the USMLEs actually writes as instructions for the people that are writing questions. Questions should not focus on the direct assessment of isolated fact. Avoid asking about the leading cause of death in some subpopulation. Instead, focus on the application of this knowledge. The NBME decided that it was not important to assess whether students know definitions. Instead, the goal became assessment of whether or not test takers could apply ethical principles on their decisions related to patient care. What this means is that you're going to have to fundamentally shift the way that you approach questions. It doesn't mean that what you were doing before was wrong. It just means that what got you here isn't going to get you there in terms of success on the USMLEs. The second issue is they don't really have a system for retention. What's different about the USMLE Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3 is that the knowledge oftentimes builds on each other. For example, the single best predictor of Step 2 scores is actually people's Step 1 score. Obviously, Step 1 is pass-fail now, but how well you do on one exam is a very good predictor of how you're going to do on the others. What this emphasizes is that you need a really good system for retention. What I used and what I recommend using is a system called Anki. Anki is an electronic flashcard program that helps you to retain information the most effectively possible. And it uses an algorithm called spaced repetition. To give you an example of what sort of results you can have with this, I study only 30 to 60 minutes per day, and I can retain just about everything that I've learned that was important since 15 years ago when I was a first-year medical student at Stanford. Regardless of what system that you use, you need to have a system in place that helps you to retain that information effectively, because the knowledge that you have for one exam for Step 1 is going to affect how it is that you do on Step 2, which is going to be the most important exam since that's the one that is scored for IMGs, as well as for Step 3, which many IMGs take on their journey through the USMLEs. Issue number 3. IMGs get blindsided by the amount of basic science there is on all the USMLEs, but especially USMLE Step 1. So obviously there's going to be differences between countries, but as a generalization, most IMGs go to medical school after high school. In the United States, students go first to university and then they go to medical school. In addition to that, for their first 2 years of medical school, they'll take courses in biochemistry, they'll take courses in immunology, they'll take courses in embryology and other basic science concepts that are then emphasized on the USMLE Step 1. USMLE Step 1 tests information that tends to be on the first 2 years of medical school in the United States. For IMGs, it's different, but by and large, most IMGs are entering medical school after high school. Also, their medical school is going to be less time overall, usually about 6 years, relative to the total amount of time that US medical students are spending in their undergrad, which is going to be 8 years total. What that means is that oftentimes what's emphasized in the curricula for IMGs is going to be different than what it is that is going to be on Step 1. So one of the biggest challenges that IMGs have is learning how to relearn or learn from the first place these subjects. If you're interested in learning more about how to master the basic sciences, we'll have some links in the description for more information on how to start from scratch. Issue number 4. One of the biggest differences for a lot of IMGs is that the format of questions is different. For the USMLEs, they're based on vignettes and they're based on multiple choice questions. What that means is that for IMGs that are used to written exams or oral exams, they're going to have to adapt to a very, very different system of test taking. In addition, there's also many more clinical vignettes than maybe they're used to. And so for both of these reasons, it becomes really important to have a system for how it is that you're going to read questions and how it is that you're going to systematically go through them. Because one of the best ways for you to improve your score is actually to make sure that you get the questions correct for the knowledge that you already have. So for example, I was scoring maybe in like the 230s, and in order for me to score higher, I actually just needed to get more questions correct for the things that I'd already studied. I would look at the questions that I got wrong, and I would realize, how did I get that wrong? I actually knew that fact, and it was because of the way that I was reading the questions that mattered so much. In the description, I'll put a link for question interpretation, which is a systematic way that we use to help students to improve their test taking regardless of the knowledge that they have. Issue number 5. On the USMLEs, there's also a lot of non-science questions. Things like public health, things like multidisciplinary teams, and ethics questions that oftentimes aren't emphasized in exams back in your home country. These questions can be particularly challenging because for IMGs, what seems ethical may seem different in one country than it is in another. So for example, one of the most important principles when you're doing, say, like a behavioral question is you always want to elicit more information from the patient. If a patient decides that they don't want to go further with their cancer treatment, the answer is oftentimes going to be try to elicit and ask them, what is it that causes you to want to take this course of action? These questions can be incredibly valuable to IMGs because they can be the difference between passing and failing. If you found this content helpful, please click the like and subscribe button, and also be sure to post a comment below on what you found in your journey as being the biggest differences for your tests back home and the USMLEs. We would also love to know what sorts of topics you'd like to cover in the future, as we would love to help guide you in your journeys in having better USMLE success.